On December 24, 1945, the Sodder family mystery started. In a home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, close to what is now New River Gorge National Park and Preserve, George and Jenny Sodder were raising their 10 children. By all accounts, they led a regular small-town life, yet the events of that night were strange, tragic, and mysterious even now. The Sodder family had a trucking business and transported coal from the area's mines. They had 9 of their 10 children with them when the fire broke out. The second oldest, Joe, was away in the army, fighting in World War II. Jenny, the mother, was awakened by a phone call at 12:30 a.m. and hurried downstairs to answer it. She informed the female caller, who had a weird laugh, that she had dialed the incorrect number. Then she hung up the phone and headed back to bed. Jenny Sodder awoke once more an hour later, this time to the scent of smoke. She sprinted into George's office, where there were raging flames. The 3 oldest kids, John, Marion, and George Jr., also made it out of the house, while the youngest Sylvie had to be carried out by Jenny and George. The steps to the attic, where the 5 smaller children slept, were already engulfed in flames. George desperately attempted to climb up to the attic from outside the home. When he reached for the ladder that was always kept against the house's side, he discovered it wasn't there. He attempted to drag one of his coal-transporting vehicles toward the residence so he could climb atop it to the 2nd floor. Despite having been driven the day before, they wouldn't start. Ultimately, the Sodders' only option was to passively observe as their home burned down and fell apart. Hours later, when the fire brigade finally arrived, all that was left was embers and ash. Everyone assumed the young Sodders were dead, all 5 of them. But when they went through the fire's wreckage, the children's bodily remains could not be located. Soon questions started to surface. The Sodders, who were Italian immigrants, believed that the children had been abducted, possibly in an effort to extort money, to force George to join the local mafia, or perhaps as retaliation for George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini and Italy's fascist government. Moreover, the fire chief's justification for why it took so long for assistance to arrive looked dubious. Daughter Marion had attempted to phone the Fayetteville Fire Department after running to a neighbor's house, but she received no response. Another neighbor attempted to dial from a nearby tavern, but once more no operator picked up. The neighbor then took a car into town to find Fire Chief F.J. Morris, even though it was only 2.5 miles to the fire department. The crew didn't show up until 8 a.m. The only thing remaining by that point was a burning pile of ash. The fire department conducted a cursory investigation, and they were done by 10 a.m. The fire department ruled the fire to be accidental, thought to have been started by defective wiring. This was odd since George had just had the wiring inspected by the local power company, which found it to be in excellent condition. The fire chief also asserted that the fire had been hot enough that the children's bodies were completely cremated. Another thing that was off about the incident was the fact that the phones had stopped working. They had initially believed that the house's phone line had burned through in the fire, but upon closer inspection, it was found that it had actually been severed by a person who was prepared to climb 14 feet up the pole and reach 2 feet away from it to cut it. Additionally, the missing ladder was found at the bottom of an embankment 75 feet away. Moreover, a life insurance salesman had tried to offer the family a policy a few months before the fire, in October 1945. Angry at being rejected, he warned that his house would go up in smoke. "And your children are going to be destroyed," and he swore at George. The man claimed that this was due to the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini. The local coroner held an inquest the day after the fire and came to the conclusion that the children had perished in the fire. The man who had threatened George with having his home burned down and his kids destroyed in retaliation for his anti-Mussolini rants was one of the jury members. In addition, Jenny found it difficult to agree with Morris's assertion that the fire had entirely destroyed any signs of the kids' remains. In the ash, numerous recognizable home items and pieces of the tin roof had been discovered. A worker at a nearby cremation whom she called informed her that even when bodies are burned at 2,000 degrees for 2 hours, much longer and hotter than the home fire would have been, human bones still survive. Their home was destroyed in less than 45 minutes. What's more, a woman claimed to have seen all 5 of the Sodder children looking out of a passing car while the fire was still burning. Another woman at a Charleston hotel who saw the children's photos in a newspaper stated she had seen 4 of the 5 missing children a week after the fire. The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of the Italian extraction, she said in a statement. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and wouldn't allow it. In 1968, George and Jenny Sodder got a photograph in the mail of a man in his mid-20s who resembled their missing son, Louis. The words Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie, Illegal Boys, and A90132, or possibly A90135, were scrawled on the back of the photograph. The Sodders always assumed the photo was in fact of their son Louis as an adult, even though the sender's identity is still unknown. The Sodder family kept a billboard on State Route 16 with photographs of the 5 missing kids and a prize for information from the 1950s until Jenny Sodder's death in the late 1980s. Sylvia Sodder, who died in 2021, still didn't think her siblings died in the fire.